an honor to be here, to be invited over here in Australia. From our point of view, the other side of the world, of course, but it's wonderful to be here. Such a lovely climate, such a lovely weather to begin with, and such lovely people. And of course, a lot of colleagues here. Colleagues, because, let me introduce myself a bit more. As well said, my name is Piet Boer, which is translated into English Peter Farmer, or Piet Farmer. So, and that's what I am. I'm a dairy farmer, and maybe compared to most of you, quite a small farmer with about 150 cows. We milk together with my wife and a full employee in the Netherlands, and we produce 1.5 million kilograms a year. And as said, over the last 5 years, up to 20th of December, I was chair of Friesland Campina, but I was involved already over a period of, I might say, I had a career of 30 years beside my farm. I started in a young farmers program in Friesland Campina, became chair of the young farmers, and then went through the ranks of Friesland Campina Cooperative, became chair of one of the region councils, and then in 2000 I was elected in the board, and I stayed in the board for Dutch circumstances quite long, for 16 years, and my terms were ended. So, and this was kind of a gift to me, that I was handed over and said, do you want to do this after your term is ended? And I said, I'd love to do it. So thank you for inviting me over. And what I like to do, and I only have a quarter of an hour left, I think now, but oh, 20 minutes. So I'll run through some slides and give you an impression about how it's already pronounced here, the European view. So I won't only talk about Friesland Campina, because I've got an awful lot of questions coming from your organization about what's happening in the EU after the abolishment of the quota, what is the effect of the Russian ban, what's happening with Brexit, and all these kind of questions, and also about farmers and farms economics. And I've said I can't handle all these questions in my presentation. Part of the questions will be answered, I think, tomorrow, when there's a session about European dairy farms and economics on the farm. Nevertheless, I will try to answer as much questions as possible and give you an interview. And Tim has already introduced it very beautifully about how we look at the marketplace and everything, the effects which it has on dairy farming and on the total industry. Dairy is deeply embedded in the European culture, and especially in the northwestern European culture. Especially when you look at the Netherlands, look at countries also like Ireland, of course, real dairy countries. And you see it here, there's quite a large percentage of the total calorie diet consists of dairy. And that has been over ages, and it's still, and you see it here, two different figures, 61 and 2011, that is even grown a bit. Now it's a bit under pressure. The total European market is a mature market, and we see some decline in fresh dairy, and we see a slight growth in cheese consumption, and in total it balances out more or less. But there is pressure, and there's a big challenge, I think, for us as farmers, looking ahead already, a remark for the future, to invest in how good dairy is for nutrition, because it isn't a given. We have to defend our position. And we recognize that in Europe especially. And coming from a city-state as the Netherlands, because we're a dairy country, but we have 17 million people living, over 70 million, living on an acreage, an area of 200 kilometers by 150 kilometers. And we're the second exporter of agriculture goods to the world. So you can see how intense we farm, how intense we are related. We always say we live in the backyard and farming in the backyard of a big city. And that means we have a lot of consumer influence and a lot of debate on dairy. Here you see the impact of dairy it's divided amongst the total, production, and calculated per inhabitant. And then you see, of course, Ireland on top. They have only 5 million people, and then the Netherlands is second with 17 million people. And then you see Denmark, France, Germany. France and Germany, of course, the big dairy countries in Europe as it comes to volume, because they are larger countries, and then Belgium and Italy. And what might strike you is the UK is totally at the bottom. Of course, there's Eastern European countries lower, but UK is not a big dairy country, and not a big dairy compared to the consumers they have and compared to the inhabited When you see what do we produce and where does it be, where do we sell our products, you see mainly cheese. And you see, that's maybe good to note here, if you see it here, only powder products, only 3%. And of course these powder products are mostly exported, and I will come to that later on. But here you already see that we try not to go into commodities if possible. Only part of the cheese business, I hate to say, is turning into commodity as well. And then here you see, and that's not our goal to be the biggest, but it helps to be big, and you can be professional, and you can be successful over the world, and you have the means to invest. But you see here is the top of the world list of dairy companies, and you see 5 out of 10 in the top 10 are European companies. But that'll change. The Chinese will come up because their market is growing, and of course, as said, the European market is not growing, it's stable. And so this is only a slight impression. But of course, there's a lot of influence. And as said, Tim pointed out so accurately, whether we export a lot or export a little, we're all influenced by the world market. Because every trader and every buyer of products knows that if we don't sell our product to him, then he knows the alternative. What's your alternative? The alternative is fallback to commodities. And commodity prices all over the world are more or less the same, because that's world traded. And this world market is influenced by 3 things we can't influence. That's economics. You see it on the left side, large stocks or lower demand in China had a huge impact over the last 2 years in the dairy market. And of course, exchange rates, all has to do with economics. We can't influence that, but we have to deal with it. Then we have politics. You see in the middle, for one thing, the abolishment of the quota, and you also see the Russian sanctions. That's all politics. It happens sometimes overnight, like the sanctions, or sometimes you see it coming, like the abolishment of the quota, but you have to deal with it and you can't really influence the effect. And then, of course, climate change. The other thing is climate. Whether it's dry, an El Nino, or whether it's very wet, now you suffer the most of it, maybe even more than we do, but it has an influence on the total world market. Looking at the total world market, the 2 biggest players on the world market are the European Union, together with the UK, I must say, still, 165 billion kilograms, and India. India is a sole country, of course, is the biggest. But we never talk about India because it's an internal market. They are hardly connected with the world market for exports, and a small, very small bit for imports, but they have so high import levies that it's hard to enter that market. And you see the total figure of milk production, 830 billion, which is a lot. It's not all, say, going through factories, it's also what is home use and everything in together. And you see that the world trade is less than 10% of that, 53 billion kilograms. But as Tim already said, the world production over the last couple of years is growing 2% per year. But we see the world trade growing at least a double. You said over 5%, don't argue about 1%, but here on the slide is about 4%. So there's where you see the growing, say, influence of world market trade. Despite all the political discussions about protectionism, about home markets, about Trump building walls and all these kind of things, world trade is still growing, and it will keep on growing. No matter what politicians will do, it will influence. It will slow down that growth probably, but the world market is there to stay. And here is what is being sold from Europe into the world market, and you see it's mainly cheese and skim milk powder. And that's, say, mostly coming from, say, those countries who have not a very high, say, developed route to market. And then they turn to commodities and just have to face the prices which are made on the world market and can't influence them. Then about the European market, and to give you an impression, there's a lot of talk about the abolishment of quota. But what you see here is that already from 2007 there was a big change. That was when the European Commission, European Union, decided to no longer support the dairy market. Really, more or less to end total price support and price mechanism in the European dairy market. Because until then we had high import levies and also, if necessary, export subsidies. There was also a lot of debate on WTO and everything, and of course New Zealand was challenging that, and that's where in 2007 that was finished. And it was faded out, but in 2 years there was no subsidy whatsoever anymore in the export market. And you see from that moment on, here you see the European market, nice, stable, no growth in prices, quite stable, and farmers had to get an increase in income or better result in getting higher productivity and better efficiency. But there was no growth in price, but it was very stable, and you can calculate at the beginning of the year what your income would be more or less throughout the year. And that has changed dramatically. After 2007, you see here, most influence of course is the New Zealand market, but especially also then New Zealand started fluctuating much more because this total volume of the European community, the European Union was selling to the world market was also influencing then more the price level because there was no subsidy anymore. So you might say this whole subsidizing program, stabilizing program, helped the stability also of the world market, and it was taken away. And then you see these big variations where we don't suffer this, but we suffer this, of course. And now as well here in 2015-16, which were very tough years for dairy all over the world, especially in, of course, New Zealand, Australia, and also in the EU, more than in the US, because the US is still quite a restricted market with a very regulated own market. They preach free trade, but they act differently. Here is what you see, what's happening with the European price, the blue one, and you see these challenges, these changes. But at the same time, more price fluctuation, but the prices are now increasing over time. Of course, we have to cope with the low years, but on average, the prices are higher. So isn't all that bad, and that also has to do with the growth of demand in the world market, especially in China. Here about this, I think also in Oceania, there's been a lot of talk about the EU doing strange things with inventory and everything. Yeah, we did. We did until this time. And you can see here in the 90s, this was why in 83 the quota were introduced, because it wasn't manageable anymore. We kept on producing, and it was all taken in storage. And you see huge storage of butter and S&P. And that was not financial solid anymore, not viable. And then the quota were introduced in 83, and that's here after the big peak. And then and you see it is all running down. And now we are here in 2000, and there's no butter intervention anymore. Butter is a success story, we know that. We've done it as an industry, taken away the myth of the margarines and putting back the goodies of dairy fat, and yes, we succeed worldwide. McDonald's worldwide is using butter again, and everyone sees the benefits of butter again. So yeah, we have to defend our product, and then you see the results. So butter is a success story. No interventions anymore whatsoever. And once in a while, some intervention of skim milk powder, only small quantities, also now in the low years,